This is Jay with Icon Systems. I'll be doing the payroll webinar today. I did mention that I sent out two attachments to an email this morning to all the participants that were signed up as of this morning. You may want to print those off for your own note-taking. I'll be going over probably the payroll setup guide pretty in-depth. The other one is more for your convenience, but I'll refer to it as well on how to do a payroll batch once we have things set up and I show you how to do an employee and so forth. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get going. I do have a disclaimer up here for Icon Systems. Because we are talking about payroll stuff and taxes, please take note of that disclaimer. Basically, we don't provide the professional advice in that. Icon Systems, we do the software. However, when it comes to tax accounting, just straight up accounting itself, financial, legal, anything like that, we do ask churches to seek the professional competence and professionals that are out there to do those things. As some of you know, we actually had an enrolled agent here about a month ago doing a seminar for you guys. We do have that webinar up on YouTube. If you just type in Parsonage Allowance, IconCMO, you'll see that come up. His name was Douglas Castle, and he would be one of those professionals that I'd be talking about. Okay, so I'll go ahead and close this so everybody sees that, and we'll go ahead and get started. Now, the other things that I want to kind of point out is those getting started guides that I actually emailed to you came from under this menu on the system, this getting started menu, and both of them are sitting right here, payroll setup guide and processing your first payroll. The payroll setup guide actually isn't just when you do initial setup, but can be referred to whenever you are setting up a new employee. You may have to refer to that to figure out, how to do their rate cards, how to do their deductions, and so forth. And then processing your first payroll. We'll show you how to do your first batch. However, obviously, if you know how to do your first batch, you can probably refer to this for any other batch as well. There's really no significance difference. We just kind of have them named that way so people can find those on the system. Okay. The first thing I want to go over is there's also an ebook out on our webpage that I would probably show you out under the church guide, and the link that I clicked on was Fund Accounting for Church Leadership. You should really read through that book, that ebook, because you really got to understand fund accounting as well. Even though you're doing payroll, that doesn't mean that you have to dismiss everything about fund accounting, because I could be paying someone, say, out of the general fund, like a senior pastor, and I could also pay a youth pastor out of the youth fund. The system is set up to do those types of things, provided you know how to do those on the system. So I would actually recommend reading this fund accounting setup guide as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. You obviously want to make sure you're in the right fiscal year. I already set myself up under 2015, and that's done under Preferences Personal. Always make sure you're in the right year for your payroll. Okay, and that's done right there, and then you can click Save. Okay. We're going to be mostly being in this payroll menu here. However, I do want to stop over at the General Ledger Chart of Accounts and kind of show you that there are times where you're going to have to set up a possible account over there before you see it in the payroll side. Okay. Everything does run through the General Ledger. Just because you do payroll doesn't mean you don't have to mess with the General Ledger. So let's just stop there for a minute under the Chart of Accounts. And if we scroll down, we'll kind of start seeing here the payroll, withholding, and taxes. And you'll notice that the category is Other Current Liabilities, Payroll, Withholding, Taxes. So if I wanted to add any additional ones in here, as you can see, I have a couple out here that I just kind of named Other for the webinar. And this is an employee type and an employer type, and I'll show that to you on the payroll side. But just know that this is where you would be adding in liabilities that have to hold money for you to pay out later. So if I wanted to add another account in here, I have all of them that I need, but let's just say I needed to add one more in here. I would click the Add New Account, and I would click Liabilities and Other Current Liabilities, just like the category of detail was, and then I would select Payroll, Withholding, and Taxes, and I should see all my other ones in here. And I can basically make a sub-account and call this Other number 2 and click Save. Okay. Now I have an additional liability account here, and I can rename these at any time. I just couldn't come up with a better name because I have them all in here already that I need: federal, FICA, Medicare, and so forth. So I just named a few extra ones just to kind of show you that I can put in as many as I need to. Okay. We do set up an initial system when you go in on the initial chart of account setup. These initial ones are in here: the FICA, the Medicare, the state, and the federal. I would advise against deleting any of those because you're going to need those if you're going to use payroll. Okay. You may need to add additional ones that we may not know about, but those are pretty standard when it comes to chart of accounts. Another thing that you're going to have to probably add in is expenditure accounts for everything. So if I come down here to more data on the list, you'll see that I actually have some staff benefit expenditures that house some of my things like the employer's FICA, the employer's Medicare, and so forth. Okay, and then I have things like the staff salaries. Okay, now I might have something called, instead of employer's FICA, I might want to also have the employee's FICA as well. So I could call it employees because they are different. Okay, FICA for their portion, right? Employers pay a portion, employees pay a portion. Well, since these are an expenditure and they're an operating expense, it's pretty easy to find those. We can add new account, same place, except we're going to go to expenditures now. And we're going to do operating expense, and I'm going to scroll down till I see staff benefits here. And I'm going to make it a sub-account in with all these other ones. Okay, and I might call it, let's see, what do I call these? I call these employers FICA, so I'll call it employee. Okay, and I would just click Save. And now when I close there, I got employee FICA and employer's FICA. You may want to split them up like that. You may run them together. It's all entirely how you are able to read your chart of accounts to determine what portion the employer paid, what portion did the employee pay. Okay? So that's really all you got to do on the chart of accounts. So we'll just go ahead and jump over to the payroll side. And the first thing we're going to go over is, or after the chart of accounts, is the employee preference window. And that's right under the PR setup screen. You're going to see this screen has a lot of things happening. So I'm going to take care of the first couple easy things. You may have some what they call paid time off adjustments. You can add things in like, say, maternity leave, for example. If you do that for your organization, you can add that, and it just adds it right in. Okay. You can also, for the employee status codes, you can add different ones in there. I think we start you with active and archived, but you can see someone put in transferred here. And when it says default, that means when you go to the employee list, those are the ones you're going to see. But obviously, we have to archive or keep the employees on the system because they have historical pay records, right? So we can't just delete them off the system. Okay, but eventually you may want to move those people to archives that have left the church for another job or whatever the case may be. Okay, now these two other boxes are where we start taking the chart of accounts, both the expenditure accounts and the liability accounts. The one down here, these are the liabilities, these are the expenses. We start tying the chart of accounts into the payroll side. Okay, I know that seems scary, but it really isn't. What you're going to do for the expenditure accounts is, if I scroll down here, you're going to see here is the staff benefit one, and I have a few checked. You notice this one's not checked. That's the one we just created. I want to check that, and I may rename it to employee FICA contribution. Okay? And the renaming, what that does is it allows on payroll checks to show this name instead of this name, because let's face it, the chart of accounts sometimes isn't named the way an employee would like to see it on their paycheck, right? Sometimes it's actually quite confusing. So we're allowing you to be able to rename these accounts to what you would want to see on the pay stub, okay? Very similar down here in the liability section, we can click on any one of these and rename them down here as well, okay? You know, instead of HSA account on the paycheck, maybe you want to type in health savings account so they know what it is, okay? Now, the other portions in the liabilities is whether or not it's an employee liability or an employer liability. Now, if you have different liability accounts, okay, you would want to have those separated, right? And most of the time, you're going to run it that way. You're going to have an employer liability for the employer's portion, and you're going to have an employee liability for the employee. And I recommend that when you're on the chart of accounts that you actually keep this naming convention over there so that when you come here, you know this is an employer and you match it to the employer. Okay, because when you match it to the employer, you got to also choose an employer expense account to hit right away. Okay, and then for this one, it's an employee, so I'm going to choose employee. The system has to know if it's an employer or an employee type tax liability. Okay, and the reason is obviously there's a couple reasons. The system has to hit an expenditure account for an employer right away. Okay. When it's an employee type liability, the money just goes into a or should I say, when it's a withholding for an employee, it goes into a liability account, not an expenditure account. The expense account is hit for the whole amount, not a particular subset of that. Okay, so when you go and choose an employer, you're going to find the employer's FICA contribution expense account, and it's a tax right from the get-go. Okay, when it's an employee, you have no expenditure account because it's basically taking money away from his gross. Okay, that's the big difference. It's taking, for an employee, it's taking money away from the gross, okay, that he's getting paid, and it's taxed right from the get-go. Now, say you have an HSA account though. HSA accounts and other types of accounts like these many times have tax, shall we say, tax breaks, right? So if I have $500 for HSA, they have to actually subtract $500 from my gross before they tax me. Well, the way you do that is you basically say it's a before tax, not just a tax. And when you choose before, this little link comes up and says configure. When you click on that, you can tell the system, okay, which items are taken after this tax, or after this withholding, excuse me. So I'm going to basically choose all of them because HSA actually has the ability to ensure that majority of all taxes that are taken out of someone's paycheck, HSA comes out first. Okay, so what's happening here is we're going to take HSA money out first, then we're going to use these taxes to decrease their gross down to their net pay. Okay, and that's all I have to do. At this point, this side is set up. Okay, this as far as preferences. Now we're wanting to go to employees and set up things for the employees individually. Okay, so we're basically went from a very generic screen, which is the PR preferences, and now we're going to start getting into individual employees. And right before we do that, what I typically tell people is you want to come into the maintain common accounts, because there are some common accounts that are the same for everybody. And I typically pick on the FICA and the Medicare. We all know that FICA and Medicare are the same percentages, whether it's the employer or the employee. Okay, so why not set it up in the common accounts area, and then I can basically just apply these to everybody at one shot. Okay, I can update all the employees, and then if I create a new employee, I just can click a button that says copy the common accounts over automatically, and then I only have to deal with the particulars that are not common accounts. Okay, so how you do this screen is very similar on how we do the withholding screens. Okay, and I'm going to go in there right now. These two screens are identical in the way they work. So I'm going to basically create an employee here called, let's call them Clemens, okay, and Kurt, okay, and I want to put in their address, city, state, zip, all that type of stuff. And the filing status right here is actually his federal, okay. Typically your filing status stays the same no matter if it's federal or state, but right now we're dealing with the federal because right here it says federal exemptions. He's going to have one for now. And then I'm also going to tell the system the default expense account is one of these, okay, and it's going to pull those expense accounts from, guess where, the preference window. We're just over there, and and all those preferences that were checkmarked are actually showing up right here, okay. So I'm going to pull it from the staff salaries, and the general fund will be the default fund, but I'll show you how I can actually manipulate that a little bit later. Now I'm going to click Save Employee, and Kurt Clemens, I can select them. Now, here's how you can remember which one you do first. These buttons, the withholding and the rate card, are on top of each other, so the top one wins, okay? So if we go to Withholding View Setup, you'll notice I have no withholdings in this box at all. Well, that's pretty easy. I can get the common accounts in there just by clicking this button, okay? They're all in there. Now I only have to worry about the non-common accounts that I have to set up. And there's two ways I can set things up. I can either use a formula or I can use a tax table. Now, what you're doing in this screen is you're going through 3 steps. The first step is choose a deduction. Notice the FICA and the Medicare don't show up because we copied them in there. So this drop-down box actually figures out, based on the liabilities that you have, again from the PR preference window, what liabilities are remaining that you said you would be setting up. Now, you may not be setting up all of them for every employee, but a good majority of them you probably will, okay? So let's say that we still got to set up the state withholding for this person. So I'm going to choose state withholding. What you're doing is you're saying for Kurt Clemens right here, I'm choosing the state withholding tax, and I'm going to, in step 2, decide how much I'm going to take from him, okay? I have 2 ways to do that. I can use the tax tables by choosing this option, and I can say Minnesota, because the church is in Minnesota, automatically pick that up. And then I can put my tax exemptions for Minnesota, because whenever I choose Minnesota, there is some additional information. The state exemptions are not always the same as federal exemptions in Minnesota, okay? And then I can click Add to Withholdings, okay? And you'll notice that whenever you do a tax table calculation, it'll actually say calculation. It will not be a fixed percent like this, okay? Now, the other way to do it is actually do a formula. Maybe the person says, you know what, I know how much I want taken out from my state, and you can do $150 percent. He's just doing a fixed amount, so he's not going to do a percentage over $0. Annual maximum, there's typically not an annual maximum on state withholding, and I can add that to the withholding. There. So now I have $150 plus 0%, and there's no limit. And you'll notice that there's nothing that says calculation here, meaning it's not from a tax table scenario. The reason we did this was we wanted to give the churches the flexibility of using a formula when needed, because there are a lot of things that tax tables cannot handle, okay? HSA being one of them. And then there's obviously the ability to do tax tables, which is a lot easier when you're in a very complicated state or so forth. depending on where you live in the United States. Okay, so I can do either one in here, and all you're doing is you're adding the withholding to be available, okay, to be used for this person. Okay, and this will then funnel down to the rate card. That'll be our next step. So now what I can do is, let's just do the next one, federal withholding, and instead of the formula, I'm going to use the tax table, and this is the federal income tax. And typically you're always a resident. If not, you might want to look at what makes a non-resident alien in the publication 15E. And you'll see here, again, that calculation comes up. So you can always look at the window and know if it's a tax table calculation, or did you put the percentage or fixed amount in, okay, using the formula method. Again, this window is exactly the same as those common account window that I showed you earlier. The amounts are put in exactly the same way. Okay, so there's no need to go over both of them, but I wanted to make that comment. Now that I close this window, yeah, that's all I want to do on this person. I'll close this window, and now we're going to get down to their rate card. And I'm going to basically create a new rate card called salary, and it's going to be the salaried amount. And a person can have numerous rate cards. And let's just say he makes $50,000 a year and he gets paid semi-monthly. It will figure out how much to pay per period. This is where I can start breaking his pay down. I can tell it to hit the staff salaries, but maybe he's a pastor. And maybe he's a youth pastor, so I want to hit the youth fund. Okay? Or if he is a senior pastor, I'll stay pastor salary, but I'll hit the general fund. Every time this rate card gets used in a payroll batch, the general fund would pay for it then versus the youth fund if this is the way it's set up. Okay, so let's just keep it all under the general fund for now. If I click Save here, you will see that these windows populate. And what these windows do is it tells you on this rate card called Salary what withholdings will be applied. Okay, and it's very typical in, let's use a person that is not a pastor. Okay, most of the time, if you're not a pastor, you're going to get probably hit with every one of these taxes, more than likely. Okay, so let's use that as a scenario. If that's the case, then you should see every one of these taxes being applied to that rate card on this side of the window. Now, let's flip the scenario. Let's say the person is a pastor, and he is a what they call a person that doesn't pay federal income tax or whatever. There's a lot of different scenarios there, and you really have to know before you even get in here which way your pastor is seen by the federal IRS. Okay, there's a lot of different variations to that, and if you're not sure, I would recommend talking to a CPA or an enrolled agent. Those are probably the only two professionals aside from a tax accountant, a lawyer, meaning a lawyer, a tax lawyer, that would probably know the difference. And to protect the church, I would recommend that you talk to them. The pastors are not always clear on those types of things, especially when the laws change. The law might have been one thing 20 years ago, but they have definitely changed since then. Okay. So let's just say on the flip side that this person is now a pastor, and he doesn't pay federal and he doesn't pay any of the FICA or Medicare, but he does pay state withholding. Okay, I would basically just click on federal withholding, the FICAs, the Medicares, and leave state withholding in this window. That means now that the state withholding will be applied. The reason they're over here in this window is they give me the opportunity, if I need to actually add say the FICA back in, I can add them back in by just clicking on them. Okay? And that allows me to now apply FICA and state to this one rate card. Okay? So now let's go ahead. I'm going to add them back in so you guys can actually see this in a batch. Okay? And I'm going to click Save here. Now I'm also going to make another rate card called Housing Allowance. Okay. And this one's, there's sometimes some confusion on it, but it's most of the time somewhat straightforward. Let's just say they get $1,000 a month, which is $12,000 a year, and they get it monthly. Okay. I'm going to click Save here, and notice it adds them all back in, but I'm going to clear these out because no taxes get applied to housing allowance. And then I'm also going to then check mark this where it says including gross wages, because housing allowance many times is not included in the gross wages. Okay. Again, that's one of those things you do got to mention or find out from your expert how that person's salary is supposed to be. Okay. And then I would just click Save on that, and I'm done. At this point, I'm going to do a batch with just this guy in it. Okay, if I go to PR batches, I'm going to create a batch for the 31st, so it'll be for the last part of the month here. Oops. Let's see here. I named it wrong here. 0315 to 0331 2015. 0315 2015, 0331 2015, and I'm going to create that batch. When I click Create, it brings me right into the window to create the batch. And now I can choose Kirk Clemens, and when I do that, you'll notice that the housing allowance is the first one, and you'll see that there's no taxes being taken out. If I change this to salary, all of a sudden now I have taxes. Okay, the federal withholding tax on that amount is $195. The two FICAs, but one is an employer portion, is $129, and the employee portion $129. If they're the same percentage, these should be the same. Okay, for right now, the federal government has said that these percentages are the same on both sides. Okay, so FICA and Medicare should come out to the same. State withholding, remember, I only put in $150, so that's why that's like that. And you'll see the employee's deductions and the employer expenses. The employer expenses basically the FICA and the Medicare put together for these two. That's how that's figuring out. I can click Add to Batch, and this is the only person I'm going to add in, so I'm going to click Close Batch. And now I can print an edit report. Now I want to go through this edit report because it's very important that you understand how this report works. Okay. This part here is pretty self-explanatory. You can see the employee's deductions and then the employer and cost. Okay, they're kind of split up into two. This was the gross pay based on the rate card. Okay, and then for each employee deduction, you got one line, and here's the $195 for federal, $129 for FICA, $30 for Medicare. And then state withholding was a $150 for a grand total of $504. This is the net payment to the employee as far as what their check's going to show. Okay. Again, the employer cost is going to be the two taxes that are going to basically net out, so to speak, to $159. But the total journal amount is actually $2,242.71. The reason is because you're going to take the gross pay plus this amount, and that's going to be the entire journal amount. Why is it more? Well, because as you guys probably know, the $2,242 amount is for everything, the employer costs, because there's always employer costs above and beyond just the gross pay of an employee. Okay, so now what about the batch summary? This is actually probably the more important thing to make sure you're right on. The change in cash right here, this line should correspond to the net pay of an employee. Now, keep in mind, if you have 5 people in this batch, it's going to be all 5 of them combined into this one line. But it kind of tells you something in that if I add up my 5 employees and their net amount is, you know, so much per employee, say just $1,000 just to make things interesting, or should I say the same, and I have 5 employees, I should see a change in cash of $5 grand. Okay, if I don't see that, I have something wrong. Okay, now the next couple of lines, these liabilities, are what is being withheld from my employers or employees' gross pay. Okay, So these liabilities here, if you add them up, okay, will equal this 504. That's the deductions coming out of their gross pay. Then you have the employer's liabilities. Guess what those are? Those are the FICA and the Medicare for the employee's portion, or employer's portion, right here. Okay. And then the salary expense is the gross pay plus the employer's FICA Medicare. Okay, so if we look at the $2,083, there's the gross pay, $2,083, and then the employer's portion of both of these expenses that get expensed right away. They don't go into a liability, they get expensed immediately. Okay? So if you really understand how this batch summary works, you can actually look at it and know each one of my employees make this much, this is how much my change in net cash should be, this is how much my employer's costs are, and you should be able to add those things up and see things very quickly if they're wrong. Okay? Once I'm done printing that, I can print that and put it in a filing cabinet. I would approve the edit and then say okay. Now I can actually do a check from them. Now we do have the ability to do direct deposit. I did not show that on the employee screen. I'll come back to it. But you can do direct deposit through Venco if you're set up with them. This system here isn't set up for that, so I'm just going to basically say it's March payments, and I'm going to click, let me see, 331, yeah. I'm going to click Post and Print, and here's my check that'll come out with the amounts for the pay stub, and this might be a stub that you keep for your records. Okay. Now, if I close that and I come back out of there, if you think about it, right now at this point, about 30 minutes in, I showed you how to set up the payroll, set up an employee, do their deductions, and did a payroll batch with them, all in under 30 minutes. Now, typically, when you already have the system set up, you should have your preferences already done. All you would have had to really do is come into the employee, put them in here, and go into the withholding rate cards and set them up. So you should literally have those done fairly quickly because you're not dealing with chart of accounts or preferences or anything like that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of switch gears a little bit in that I want to basically show you how this PR pay taxes screen works. And this is when you have to pay like the U.S. Treasury. Okay, and you'll notice that this screen, the way it knows how much money you owe the government is everything is sequential. So say you put in a date and it shows that you have paid, that you have tax liability of $5 as of say 3/30. You pay that $5 as of 3/31 to the Treasury. If you run this screen as of say April 1st and you had no other activity as far as payroll stuff, no other liabilities being hit, okay, your liability will now be zero because you paid out the $5. But if you go back into the screen and type in 3/30 again, right, you're going to see that same $5 pay because the payment didn't happen yet. Okay, the payment happened on 3/31. The reason the screen shows you that it's still there is we're showing you that while it's still there, you've already paid it. Okay, and you'll see what I mean here in a minute. I just got to get the right date. Submit. Okay, you'll notice I actually cleared out all my liabilities as of 3/30. Okay. For this presentation, so I show no money. I don't know when I cleared them out, or what day I cleared them out at, but now let's show 3/31. Notice, because I cut that check for Kurt on 3/31, notice now his taxes are now due, okay, or should I say they're showing up as of 3/31. So what will happen is, typically when you pull money out of someone's paycheck, you got to report those taxes sometime. So let's just say here it is all of a sudden now it's April, okay, and it's April 10th and I have to do my taxes, and send this money into the Treasury Department. I would choose 331, and I would basically say I want to mark all these. Now keep in mind, the one thing I'm not showing you is many times that these actually go to different entities. If they do, you got to basically mark them separately and choose the right agency to pay up here. Okay, but I'm going to mark them all in one shot, so it kind of simplifies things a little bit. And I'm going to pay these as of, say, the 10th. Okay, and I'm going to click Post and Print. Tax. Oh, I got to put the taxes, and I'm just going to put in there. This is March 2015 tax payment. All. Okay, I'm going to click Post and Print, and I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice that I've paid all those taxes out, okay, to one Treasury. I'm just going to minimize that. You'll notice what happens is it says a payroll tax for 664.07 was written out to the U.S. Treasury after 331. So what that means is if I actually type in here 04/05/2015, I still show those amounts. The reason is because I didn't do the check until the 10th. So now let's just put the 11th in here. You'll notice here now I have 0 again because I made a payment on the 10th. Right there on the 10th is the absolute last day it'll show. If I go back one more day, again they show up, but see when I go before that 10th date, a little message comes up and tells me there was a check written out after this 409, letting me know that, hey, even though these amounts are showing, there was a check written out zeroing these out. Okay, so that's how you take care of paying your taxes. Okay, so now at this point, I believe, let me just look over these different things. Oh, and reports. There's also a report screen. While I can't go through all these reports, obviously the best thing for you guys to probably do is actually look at each one of these. But there's a lot of different reports out there, and also under PR activity. This screen kind of gets missed a lot, but there's a lot of things that in here you can do. For example, say your printer jams all your checks up. You can actually come in here and reprint the entire batch. Okay. This is also the only screen. If you have to void something in payroll, you cannot void it on the GL side. You have to come into payroll. So say his check was bad completely because I just really messed up, I'd actually click on it, and there's a void button here that I'd void out. Okay. If you go to the GL register under General Ledger and try to do it, you will not be able to do it. Okay. In fact, you won't be able to do anything over there because payroll is kind of treated as a different entity, so to speak. Even though the transactions run through the General Ledger, you have to change the stuff in payroll. Okay? And the appropriate people that have those credentials to get into the payroll are the only ones that are allowed to do it. So now I'm going to open it up for questions. There's probably really only one way to do questions, and that's through typing those in under the questions chat. There's quite a few people on today. Some of them are using mic and speakers, and there's probably a lot of background noise on those. So if you could just chat those questions in, I'll go ahead and try to take those. I will comment that there are sometimes questions are probably better left if you guys call in if they're really specific to your church. But please go ahead and ask me any questions you are having struggles with, and we'll go from there. One question, since most federal taxes must be paid online, could you show us how to do that? You more than likely have a sign-on onto the federal website. I know our boss does. He actually uses the same software as you guys are for our internal payroll. So you probably go out online more than likely to do that and have them drafted from your bank account. If that's the case, what you'd want to do is under pay taxes, instead of using a check number, just type in EFT. This will still zero those items out, okay? But you're telling the system, you know what, I don't want to check. just assign an EFT. Okay, EFT can be used everywhere on the system as far as on the accounting side, because EFT stands for electronic fund transfer, and that's what you're really doing. Just because you pay it online doesn't remove the problem with you still got to zero your liabilities out. I mean, you're paying the government. You need those liabilities to go back to zero as of that day, right? So that process doesn't change. It's just a matter that you don't want to check. You don't want a physical check to come out. So you would sign up with the government on their online payment thing. I can tell you when you do your W-2 stuff, if you actually come over to the PR reports area and you choose W-2, right here is the Social Security. We actually put the link right here to do your W-2s, and when you click on that, it brings you to the Social Security thing, and you can actually go here to complete a phone registration, go here to register. You should be registering your entity. Churches are included in here for all your employees. It's going to ask you probably some entity numbers for your nonprofit. I don't know exactly what it asks you, but I'm assuming you have some type of entity numbers. And you will just log in. The nice thing about this is that when you put your W-2s in, okay, I know that's not exactly your question, but when you put your W-2s in, the system will actually electronically file on this website, electronic file for your employees, and also allow you to print out W-2s automatically. So you don't even need to have these companies and pay big money for W-2s. Just fill it in on the Social Security Administration website and give them and pass them out to your employees. Okay. The next question is, I got a helpful comment from a user. They said that you're going to need the EIN number for the SS website, which she means Social Security website. EIN stands for Employer Identification Number. She must do this because she obviously knows the name. I do not. So, okay. Let's see. When doing a payroll batch, if we pay some employees through EFT in our bank but write actual checks for some, do we need to do a separate batch for each group? EFT, yeah, that's one scenario we haven't programmed in. We have the ability, if you were doing direct deposit through Venco, to separate those. So when you come into PR checks, you could basically, if you were direct depositing and the direct deposit wasn't set up with them, it would actually print the physical check. But if you're doing it through your bank, then you would probably want to do two batches, because there's really, if you type in EFT here, it's going to EFT everybody, and that's not what you want. So yeah, okay. Yeah, if you do, a question is, if you do direct deposit through Venco, will the church need to contact them even though they might have direct deposit, or should I say EFT set up for donations? Yes, Venco has to add that to your account. That's an additional thing, and it does change things, and they will actually fill out something on our website to set up your direct deposit. Just so you guys have an idea what you should see after they are done, okay, is down here it says right here, you should see the routing number and an account number field for you to fill in for each person, okay? If you don't see that, they do not have it set up correctly, and I know we always get calls in from users saying Venco's told them that their direct deposit's set up, and we come in here and the fields are not right. It's because they don't, Venco has not gotten you guys set up correctly. So always make sure that when they say you're set up, that when you come into the payroll screen, you should see two fields, okay, set up right here. One allowing you to put in an account number, and one allowing you to put in the routing number of the person's bank, okay? It's not set up correctly, okay? If we have an employee that we accidentally didn't do withholdings for, can you show us how to use one-time PR check? Okay, yeah, that screen there, one-time check. This person is asking basically, how do I make a correcting entry when someone has accidentally messed up, so to speak, okay? This screen here looks really complicated, okay? However, I'm going to show you how easy it is, okay? First is you're going to decide what checking account is going to come out of. That's a pretty simple question to answer. Then you're going to select who is the payee, okay, which means your employee. And then what rate card should have been applied to. And the reason we are having you do that is because you need reports at the end of the year, and those reports are formulated by the rate card. For example, say this was a past year where you messed up on. Well, did you mess up on the salary rate card or the housing allowance? Because each one of those have different tax ramifications, right? Say you messed up on the housing allowance where you should have included an extra $200, right? It wasn't $1,000, it was $1,200 a month. Well, if there's no taxes taken out of it, there's probably minimal tax ramifications. But say that $200 was wrong on the salary card where there is taxes taken out on it. That's going to be a huge ramification, right? So you got to make sure you get the right rate card. Now, then you're going to figure out, okay, is this do we owe them money? I'm assuming most of the time churches do owe the employee money when they mess up, most of the time. But let's just say it's, $200 that you owe them. Now, here is what happens is, you're going to have to figure out how much taxes should have been taken out of that person, okay? And this screen is split up into two. There's the employee's liabilities and the employer's liabilities, okay? So on this $200, what taxes should have happened? And let's say we decide that it should have been federal, and I'm going to have to increase the federal. Notice the plus is on the credit side. In other words, I got to put money into the credit side, okay? And I'm going to type in, say, $5, and I'm going to click Add, okay? And by the way, this is actually, I believe this is the net pay that you're paying them, okay? And then let's just make it real simple and say state, and they're another $5, okay? And we'll do FICA as well. We'll just do $3, and then where's Medicare? Right there, Medicare, and we'll do 7 there. Okay, so we have $20 that should have came out of their paycheck. Okay, we're also going to basically have to figure out the employer liability. Well, the FICA should be the same as this one over here, which was $3. So we're going to put $3 over here, and Medicare should be also the same. That was 7. There's no other taxes on the employer side most of the time. Okay, and then I'm going to decide what expense account am I going to hit for the employee expenses, what fund, and then what date did this happen on? I'm just going to say, or what date from and to. I got to put in when were the wages accounted for. And I'm just going to put the same date range and make up for missing 200. Okay, and I can click only print a check, do not direct deposit. Okay, and since the person doesn't have direct deposit set up, it's going to basically print. But I'm going to do the print edit first. The print edit button is first, step 1, step 2. Okay, so I'm going to do print edit. Here's my $200 in gross pay, but out of that, $20 was tax. Okay, so the net payment was $200, and then there was an additional $10 in employer's cost. Okay, for a grand total of $230. You should see the $230, and I already explained how this batch summary works, so I won't go over that. Hopefully that answers your question. Then I would just click post and print, and I should have a check for $200, and then the journal amounts. Or not the journal amounts, the pay stub information. Okay? And that's posted to the person's account now under the right rate card, under the right person, so that it comes out on reports for them. Someone mentioned here, Libby did, when you are set up for direct deposit, there are times you want to, not times, I would actually verify this every time. When you go into PR checks and you've submitted this through Vanco, it'll actually, once you click post and print, it'll actually submit it to Vanco. I would log into Vanco because Vanco has an interface for you to double check people, okay? And make sure that Vanco received all of your employees, because there could, it could have been a problem that, you're talking about communicating payroll information. An employee may not even be over on Vanco, okay? We do make attempts to add them in, but if they don't get added in for some reason, or they were there before, okay, I believe that if, say, they had some information sitting out there from a previous time, we don't actually overwrite it, okay, because then you don't know how much money is going to, which one should be deposited in the person's bank. Is it the first one or the second one, okay? So you always want to basically double check, go into Vanco, and what you should be doing is you should be getting that batch edit report. Remember that print edit report when you do your batch, print that off, and you should be able to go down that report and see those amounts over at Vanco every time for direct deposit. And keep in mind, Vanco does have some stipulations there for direct deposit. In other words, if your pay is on the 31st, you actually got to submit it, I think, 5 business days ahead of time. So you definitely don't want to make a mistake and figure it out on the 31st, because if you got to resubmit it, people are going to be waiting 5 days at least for the direct deposit to go through, and that's 5 business days, not including weekends. I believe that's how it's set up over there. So it would benefit you to ensure that you have everything set up and that you see everybody's name over there. And Vanco can show you what screen to go into and actually double check everybody, all the money, how much money is going in, or should I say how much money is going out, so to speak, okay? And they did confirm, the person that's, Libby did confirm it's 5 business days, because it sounds like she actually uses Vanco. So just make sure that those are there, okay? Okay, I don't see any other questions, so thank you for attending the webinar. I know this week's been a little hectic for everybody, but feel free to give us a call or email us questions on the payroll if you have any. Again, the Getting Started guides are up in the right-hand corner of the Getting Started. Here's the payroll and processing your first payroll batch. So please give us a call if you have any questions on that. And as I mentioned in the email, we're hoping to have the recordings for the webinars in about 2+ weeks or so. Please give us some time on those. Those always, editing videos always take some time. And we're doing a lot of webinars this week. So give us some time on those and we'll get those out as soon as they're ready. Okay? I hope you all have a great day, and thank you for attending.